My name is Morgan Thompson, and today I'm going to talk about my research on the barriers to accessing healthcare for undocumented immigrants. Today, I want to discuss with you what I've found throughout my research in regards to the lack of access and rights undocumented immigrants and their families have to healthcare. The right to healthcare access should be without a question obtainable for individuals in the United States. Unfortunately, the vast majority of undocumented immigrants in the United States face many barriers preventing them from accessing proper healthcare. The inability to obtain access to health care for those undocumented immigrants puts so many families and their children's lives at risk. So I want you to picture this. I had the chance to interview a family. Both the father and the mother had traveled from Mexico, who were both undocumented immigrants in America. They had their son, who I worked directly with for an autism services company. And they shared their story with me well before my research, and this is really what sparked me to do some more research into it. So, unfortunately, they did not receive very many health benefits and had to pay a lot out of pocket, which the mom did not work. It was just the dad, and he did not make much money. So it was very difficult to obtain these services, but they wanted to do it for their son. I remember coming in to their home one day, and the dad had completely cut through his finger. It without a doubt needed work on it, and he expressed that they couldn't afford it, and they were using all of the money that they had for their son to receive autism services. I came back a week later, and his finger was extremely infected. I wished that there was something I could do, but they just didn't have the money or the means to go treat it. And the irony of the whole thing was that he worked at a hospital and he still could not treat it. Fortunately, he's fine, and he was lucky, but what he constantly expressed is that obtaining healthcare is a luxury, it's not right. It is common to see many undocumented immigrants of all ages sharing their stories and hardships and trying to obtain health care. Often they share these through protests. If the story about the family I worked for did not shock you enough, hopefully the video I share on the following slide will show you how big of a deal the lack of health care can be. Many undocumented immigrants not only struggle with obtaining, but live in a world of fear if they get sick. Many people, both young and old, live with pain and illness in order to avoid going to the hospital and being outed.
Day after day, I hear her voice haunting me. Anak, if I die, you can sell all my jewelry and my possessions so you can bury me without debt. But Anak, if I ever go to the hospital, I will bury us in debt.
The struggle for me is that fear of trying not to get sick and not going to the hospital or not seeing a doctor, as well as the cost of having to go to the hospital, having to see a doctor. I remember I got hit by a car, and I stood up right away because I didn't want the ambulance to take me to the hospital because I knew how much that bill would cost. So a lot of my experiences were really tough to go through, and even now, I'm fearful of going to the hospital or seeing a doctor because of just prior experiences.
There's many expenses and implications that come from a lack of health care. Undocumented immigrants face serious barriers to medical care and pay more out of pocket when they receive care. In addition to the obvious health and humanitarian concerns associated with poor health care access, other economic and social reasons cause concern. Unresolved health problems can limit immigrants' ability to maintain productive employment, particularly given that many workers work in physically strenuous jobs or in jobs in which there is a high incidence of occupational injuries. Human beings have the basic right to health care. Restricting undocumented immigrants from this right is an extreme ethical issue, and it takes a huge toll on these families. I want to discuss next the Affordable Care Act. This act, although has, I want to add, helped people, including undocumented immigrants in some ways, a lot of time things that they just don't share is that it does have implications on those undocumented immigrants. It's supposed to help many people who are poor to receive these kind of benefits, but what a lot of people don't realize, it does affect and hurt some undocumented immigrants. So there is many implications that it has on undocumented immigrants and the lack of eligibility this act has on undocumented immigrants to obtaining healthcare access and insurance. This act leaves immigrants with very few options on how to obtain healthcare for their families that are not extremely expensive. It is quite clear that the Affordable Care Act is making it much harder for the racial and ethnic minorities in the United States to obtain health insurance. Through the Affordable Care Act, the overall goal of the act was to expand Medicaid and overall provide health insurance for low-income families, as well as subsidize to low-income families to buy health insurance through the Affordable Care Act insurance exchanges. Although this act did help many low-income families, what people were not realizing is its negative effects on the undocumented immigrants and their families, whom were also part of low-income families seeking aid and assistance with health insurance access. And many of them are fighting and don't receive these acts like they should be, even if they are living in America. Next, I want to discuss the Latino and Hispanic paradox. This theory is that even though better health is usually linked to wealth and education, low-income Mexican immigrants with little formal schooling, 9th grade on average, are healthier than the overall U.S. population, according to a number of measures including certain cancers, heart diseases, and mental health. In addition, immigrant Latinos have lower rates of smoking, drug use, and sexually transmitted diseases. According to experts, Latinos aren't the only immigrants who are healthy. Only to see a decline over time, the healthy immigrant effect has been documented among European, African, and Asian immigrants, and it's explained in a number of ways. One assumption is that immigrants tend to be young and strong with sufficient physical vigor to uproot their lives and in some cases make an extremely difficult journey to arrive here. One person's quoted, "You're not going to cross the desert in 110 degrees Fahrenheit if you're weak. Immigration is a selective process. It's for people who are relatively hardy and optimistic." Many doctors even tell people, when you get here, eat where you came from. When they come to America, they pick up on a lot of bad habits. And with the Latino paradox, many undocumented immigrants take jobs that many people don't want. They work long and dangerous hours, and that's already bad for their health. And the cheapest and easiest food is the fast food. So it's coming here is supposed to bring, people a better life, but in a lot of ways, people are healthier, so coming here is just, it does take a strain on people's health, both physically and mentally, but in this case, definitely physically. In discussion to mental health of undocumented immigrants, with a lack of healthcare access, it affects undocumented immigrants and their families' overall mental, physical health, and overall well-being. So one thing that struck me was the threat of DACA being taken away with President Trump under administration. There is a fear that these undocumented immigrants who gained access to healthcare will now lose it. Undocumented immigrants face many fears, one being the fear of deportation. Through DACA, they help protect undocumented immigrants from being deported. But if Trump takes this away, these undocumented immigrants are not sure of what will happen to them in the future. Taking away DACA will cause serious implications. In a statement made by the president of the American College of Physicians, he noted that over 800,000 individuals are at risk of losing their protections under DACA. If this comes to pass, many of these individuals will avoid seeking health care for fear of being detected and deported. Many of those deported will return to countries with unstable social environments and poor healthcare services. The looming possibility of deportation for both DACA recipients and their undocumented parents can adversely affect mental health and childhood development for those young people. Studies show, however, that immigrants are less likely to claim public benefits compared to native-born individuals, even if they are eligible for a variety of reasons, such as unawareness, access barriers, fear of deportation, and a strong belief of self-reliance, which could lead to lower health. It is devastating to learn about all the families, especially those with children, who live lives without access to health care. Fortunately, there are several programs that are trying to make a difference regarding health care for undocumented immigrants, and in particular their children. So a couple programs I want to discuss is CHIP, which stands for Children Health Insurance Program, and Medicaid. Though undocumented immigrants have access to less healthcare coverage, there are still options such as CHIP and Medicaid, but individuals must meet certain strict qualifications in up to a 5-year period to even receive these benefits. Though undocumented immigrants have access to less healthcare coverage, there are still options such as CHIP and Medicaid. When looking at a state level, most states are more supportive of undocumented immigrants, children receiving health care, rather than the adults. Although it's important that children do receive health care, what about all the adults left without any access to health care? Many undocumented immigrants are left uninsured and living in fear for them and their families' health and future. Healthcare should be a basic human right, but for undocumented immigrants, obtaining healthcare is not a right, it's a dream. The public charge bill in Congress. The public charges rely on government assistance, but what exactly is the definition of a public charge, and could receiving any benefits hurt an immigrant's chances of becoming a U.S. citizen? Public charge is a term used in immigration law to describe an individual who cannot support himself or herself through employment, assets, or the help of family, and instead depends on government benefits and assistance program. To determine whether a person is a public charge, United States Citizenships and Immigration Services look at a number of factors, including age, assets, career skills, education, financial status, health, and the status of the immigrant's family. They also check to see if an immigrant will require long-term institutional care or if an individual has used welfare programs like supplemental security income, temporary assistance for needy families, or other general assistance programs. Use of these programs, especially short-term use of these programs, does not automatically disqualify someone from obtaining permanent residence. They also evaluate each individual on a case-by-case basis. Not all immigrants are eligible, but those who have the opportunity to quite a few benefit programs. It is important that undocumented immigrants do know their rights, including the public charge bill. Many undocumented immigrants cannot afford to obtain legal help or access to their rights for programs such as this bill, so it's important that they know immigration lawyers do exist and are a good outlet for undocumented immigrants in regards to finding out what their rights are. In conclusion, coming to America can be more dangerous than undocumented immigrants know, as they are exposed to unsafe living conditions, occupational hazards, lack of access to routine health care, scarceness of a social and financial support system, fear of deportation, discrimination, and incarceration limit healthcare access of unauthorized immigrants. Lack of access to preventative primary care encounters often results in this population's dependence on acute emergency services for treatment. Lack of opportunity for advanced care planning discussions and lack of eligibility to hospice services commonly contribute to a poor end-of-life care. Healthcare is a basic human right, and it is devastating to learn more about the lack of healthcare access undocumented workers and their families are experiencing and the toll it takes on their families. Through my paper and arguments, I hope to spread awareness on this issue, to spark conversation and open the eyes to many on how devastating this topic is and how we can support these families, especially during a time like this. And here are my references. I felt like in class, in regards to discussing everything, we constantly talk about the lack of rights and basic human rights, such as healthcare that undocumented immigrants receive. They are taking extremely challenging, difficult, and life-threatening trips to get here, and to find out that they aren't even required healthcare is just devastating, especially with Trump in office trying to build a wall. These people are just trying to have a better life, and we constantly express that through class. And I'm just extremely saddened learning more about all the lack of healthcare that they do have. And it's just another right that should be a basic human right that undocumented immigrants are not given. Thank you.